Good morning, 10th grade. We are going to try to get through section 2 of chapter 23 today. That is an ambitious plan because this is a long section and I hope we can get through it, but if we don't, then we'll just finish it tomorrow or Monday. Okay, so let's talk about the Cold War and the spread of communism. When we left off yesterday, we had finished talking about the Berlin airlift, the Truman Doctrine, the Marshall Plan, many different things that America was doing and encouraging other parts of the world to do to keep the world from turning to communism. Okay, so that's where we're going to pick up today with the Cold War. Now, why do we call this the Cold War instead of just the age of whatever? A Cold War is when two countries are facing off as enemies, but not ever coming to the point that they actually exchange gunfire. And that's what's going on here during this period from the end of World War II into the early 1990s. Okay, so communism is spreading in different areas of the world at this point. This is the early 1950s ish. Okay, these are mostly limited wars, meaning that they're being fought in a particular location and not worldwide. We're going to talk about the Korean War today. We're going to talk about the Vietnam War. Both of these wars are fought in a specific country and maybe the surrounding countries, but no further than that. Okay, let's go back to China where we had left off before World War II, with China in the middle of a civil war. Their civil war was between Chiang Kai-shek with the Kuomintang Party and Mao Zedong with the Communist Party, and they were fighting each other for who was going to control China. When the war, World War II, ended and the Japanese pulled out, that war resumed. Chiang Kai-shek versus Mao Zedong. By the time it's all finished, the nationalist forces, those under the control of Chiang Kai-shek, had been driven out of the country to the island of Formosa, which is modern-day Taiwan. They were gone, and the communists took over China. The U.S. at that point in the 1950s, I think the final victory was in 49 or somewhere in there. The U.S. decided to recognize the nationalist government in Taiwan as the official government of China. And that will continue into the 1970s when Richard Nixon will change that. We'll come back to that probably later. Okay, so let's go to Korea. Okay, so we know now that Russia is has fallen to communism. China is communist. Korea, after the war, had been divided into two zones. The northern part of Korea had been given to the control of the Soviet Union, and the southern part was under the control of the United States. We quickly reestablished a government and got out. Let them take over. They are capable of running their own country. But very quickly, in fact, in 1950, North Korea invades South Korea and tries to reunite the two parts of the country into one country, all under communism. Well, when the United States sees this, the president is Eisenhower at the time. Truman, it was Truman. When Truman sees this going on, he does not want Korea to fall to communism. So he, rather than going to Congress where he thinks he'll get some opposition, he goes to the United Nations and he says, we can't let this fall. We can't let Korea fall to communism. We have to go in and save it. So they take UN forces, mostly United States soldiers, into Korea to help Korea fight for its independence. When they first arrive, they have that third point down, the amphibious assault at Incheon. North Korea has overrun almost the entire peninsula. If you go back, oh, one more slide. Nope. Nope, it's not there. Okay, it must be on another slide. Sorry. They had originally, Korea is a peninsula surrounded on three sides by water. And originally, when the North Koreans came into South Korea, they took over almost the entire country. They were on the verge of victory when General Douglas MacArthur, who had come to fame for the United States during World War II, lands troops at Incheon, which is in South Korea, but barely. Okay, I'll show it to you on another map. And he is able to, with his troops and with the South Korean troops, push the North Koreans back into North Korea. At that point, he's almost done. He's almost got all of the North Korean troops pushed not only back through North Korea, but almost all the way into China. He is on the verge of a complete victory, but he needs a little bit more soldiers, a little bit more support from America to finish the war and get Korea reunited as one country that's not communist. But at that point, in 1953, President Truman and Omar Bradley, who was the joint leader of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, did not want to do it. They did not want to risk having a war with China on top of the Korean War. So they told him no. But MacArthur really wanted this wider war. So he went out and talked, instead of doing what he was told to do, which is what any good soldier should do, he went out and talked to the press. He went public with his opinions. And because he spoke out so strongly against the president and the powers, his supervisors, he was relieved of command. And that's what you see in this newspaper here. He was fired by President Truman. So finally, an armistice is signed. And what they do in that armistice is somewhere around the 38th parallel, they created a demilitarized zone. No soldiers are supposed to be in that zone, no weapons. It's just I believe it's about 3 miles wide or something like that is what I read somewhere. It's a wide strip between the two countries where there's nothing that happens. Okay. That's to protect both sides and to keep things civil. Now, we all know that today North Korea is run by Kim Jong-un, who, mysteriously enough, has not been heard from in weeks. Don't know what's going on there. But South Korea, as Edwin would tell us if he were here with me in this room, is a thriving country, doing very well, and it's a great place to be. So that is the story of the two Koreas. The next thing we need to talk about is the Vietnam War. Excuse me. In Vietnam, it was a similar case to what went on in North and South Korea. Vietnam had been a French colony before World War II. But after the war, the French wanted to come in and take over again. But Ho Chi Minh, who was a communist sympathizer, he was a communist leader, came into his country. He is from Vietnam, and helped gather a group of soldiers and fight off the French. He wanted Vietnam to be a free country. So at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, Ho Chi Minh defeated the French forces. And as a result of that battle, the peace that was signed, Vietnam was split into two countries. North Vietnam would be controlled by Ho Chi Minh and the communist forces, and South Vietnam would have a free republic government. Unfortunately, along with the free forces in the south part of Vietnam, there were also members of an organization called the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong were communist sympathizers who began trying to plot taking over all of Vietnam for the communists. You couldn't tell them apart. They looked like just normal Vietnamese people. But here they were being sympathetic towards the communists in North Vietnam and setting up South Vietnam for failure. So one thing that the United States did was they created an organization called SEATO, S-E-A-T-O. And that organization was to help to say that we were going to support Vietnam and help them maintain their independence as they continued to work towards that and to help them remain free of communism. We did not want the domino theory to happen. The domino theory was something that our President Dwight Eisenhower believed. He thought that if Vietnam fell to communism, then the countries around it would gradually fall one at a time. And he believed this all over the world, that if communism gets a foothold in one area, that all the countries around it will soon fall as well. Okay, next, let's talk about the Vietnam War. I've got 3 minutes left, so I hope I can do this fast. We sent troops into Vietnam because of the SEATO pact that we had made with them. We're going to send troops in to help them fight off communism. But then in 1964, in the Gulf of Tonkin, which is just off the coast of Vietnam, an American ship gets attacked by North Vietnamese forces. And because of that attack, Congress issues the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which is basically saying that the president can now use whatever force he wants to use to protect American interests in Vietnam. Our forces, our troops, anything. He can use whatever force is needed. So quickly, the number of American troops went from about 24,000 to over 500,000. It was a huge influx of troops over the course of a few years. And we were being successful. We were winning the war and helping South Vietnam remain free until January of 1968, when the Tet Offensive happened. The Tet Offensive was those Viet Cong soldiers who were sympathetic to North Korea plotted a riot in various towns all over Vietnam for the Tet holiday, which is their New Year's, okay? And they all tried to take over their countries, their cities on that day. Well, on military level, the Tet Offensive was a complete failure. But it was really a propaganda victory for the communists, because all of a sudden Americans look at it and go, we aren't on the verge of winning this war. This war is in shambles. It's horrible. We need to pull out before more young Americans lose their lives. And that's where I'm going to have to stop and leave you hanging, okay? We'll pick up here tomorrow. Enjoy your day.